Hello, good evening, and welcome. Welcome to the 24th episode of Attlas Live on this rather chilly fall Friday in November. This evening, we are going to, in a way, follow up on our live stream from Wednesday. But it won't have been necessary for you to have tuned in on Wednesday. But if you did, that's great. If you didn't, you can always go back and watch it on YouTube or on Facebook. But it won't necessarily be critical as we explore tonight's topic. We were in part inspired to approach the topic of conviction and courage of conviction because on Wednesday we were talking about picking one's battles and the history of behind the film the history behind the film Hacksaw Ridge by Mel Gibson came up, and we were discussing how Desmond Doss, who the film is about, he's the only conscientious observer ever to receive the Congressional Medal of Honor for service. He entered into the Second World War on the basis that he would not take a life. And he refused to carry a gun. And for that transgression, in his refusal to obey orders when he was ordered to carry a rifle, ended up leading to a court-martial hearing. And Desmond Doss, Private Doss, he had no special rank, no special privilege, stood up and upheld with the courage of his conviction that he would not carry a rifle, that he would not take a life, but that he wanted to serve. He knew he had to serve. He wanted to serve his country. And he felt the best way that he could do that would be to serve as a medic, as a combat medic. And that he would go into combat with his fellow soldiers. And he would serve as a medic, but with no means to defend himself. No sidearm, no rifle of any kind. It's a remarkable film, difficult to watch. And what's remarkable about it is it reveals to us a great deal about the nature of this word conviction. And indeed, the nature of the word courage. We intimated in the description to this video how the word conviction has been degenerated. Its meaning, like the meaning of so many words, has fallen prey to the phenomenon of entropy, which is order leading to disorder and everything breaking down. So truth breaking down into untruths, lies, and misinterpretations and half-truths and shadowy remnants of the truth, shadowy reflections, perhaps. But the essential meaning of words does tend to get lost, conflated, confused, confounded, or outright contradicted. When one thinks of the word conviction, in fact, when one does a search for the word conviction, a Google search,
to find info about something, just ask. You can say something like, how long?
That was our phone responding to the phrase Google and search. Boy, these smartphones are very smart, aren't they? They're so smart, they don't know the difference between speaking and me speaking to the phone. In any case, let's do this. We might as well go through this exercise together. Let's do a search for so here we see that according to Google, according to the definitions it finds on the internet, conviction is a formal declaration that someone is guilty of a criminal offense made by the verdict of a jury or the decision of a judge in a court of law. For example, she had a previous conviction for a similar offense. The second form of the word, the second definition, a firmly held belief or opinion. She takes pride in stating her political convictions. Now, going back to our hero here, Desmond Doss. Desmond Doss went to Okinawa, Japan, along with his company, and ascended the so-called Hacksaw Ridge, which several companies ahead of them failed to take and were horribly slaughtered by the Japanese. The Japanese fought ferociously. And Desmond Doss went into battle without a firearm with his company. And their company, too, was utterly decimated. Utterly. And there were literally hundreds of men wounded and left for dead on the ridge as the remaining soldiers who managed to survive the first wave, they descended back down the ridge to the beach where that was held by the Americans. Desmond Doss stayed on the ridge, and over the next 12, 18 hours, perhaps all through the night, he single-handedly went over the ridge, which was now held by the Japanese, and until morning, he single-handedly found, treated, and rescued 75 wounded soldiers. And he let them down the ridge. He made a makeshift harness for them out of rope, and he let them down physically. And the next day, his company, which had been reinforced, was going back to take the ridge, and he returned with them back into the fight. When you consider that, and when you consider the fact that he had faced a court-martial, and then he goes to Japan and he performs what his fellow soldiers and every man that he saved simply referred to as a miracle. And Desmond Doss himself never took any credit for his heroism. He said the entire time, while he was up on the ridge in the dark, alone, scouring the strewn and mangled bodies of the dead, looking for survivors, listening for calls for help in the dark, the whole time, all he was doing was praying, God, just let me save one more. Just help me save one more. What is it about that story? What is it about that conviction that sounds like a belief or an opinion to you? What is it about that story, that true story? Sounds like something related to a criminal, someone who is guilty of a criminal offense. Does one perform an act of heroism like that because of a belief? And what belief could he have possibly had? Could he possibly have had? The word conviction, if we look not for the meaning, but the etymology of the word, we end up breaking the word down into its two components, con and wake or vict, victus, as in invictus, as in the word victory. Can we make this? Yeah, okay. Yeah, all right. So com is the archaic or classical Latin form together, together with, or in combination with. To be beside, to be near, to be by, or to be with. This becomes the first part of the word conviction. And wake, although it means to fight and to conquer, right? A conqueror, vincere, Latin, the victor, a conqueror. But also we have various different versions of this, you know, able in battle, to fight, to be brave, to be energetic. To be one with, to be together with the victorious. To be with victory. To be on the side of the victorious. How does this become belief and opinion? And how does to be on the side of the victorious become associated with criminals? Well, the word conviction to be one with the victorious, to be one with God, to be one with the Logos, to be together with, to be bound together with. To be bound together with is yug in Sanskrit and religare in Latin, the root words of yoga and religion. To be bound together with, as in the ties that bind. So the very heart of esotericism and spirituality is this concept. And not just a concept, but the metaphysical practice, the metaphysical science of achieving union with one's own innermost divinity. And through that union, through that togetherness, through that oneness, through that binding together, through those ties that bind, achieving oneness and union with all beings, through the Logos, through the innermost intimate Christ, which is an essence of the perfect multiple unity, the great Christic force. So conviction, then, is to be one with the triumphant, with the resplendent, with the glory, with the majesty of that which is victorious over the dark, over evil. To be one with love, to be one with resplendence, to be one with compassion, to be one with the Logos, to be one with the Christ. At no point in the etymological foundations of the word conviction does belief or opinion or criminality enter into the picture. But to the Black Lodge, to the egos, who are the adversary, they don't want the Christ to be victorious, and they don't want any monads, any souls to be victorious, and they certainly don't want any of us to be bound together and to be on the side of the victorious. The Black Lodge, the egos, our egos, want to enslave us. The battle for the souls of humanity between the forces of light and dark, good and evil, white and black, the White Lodge and the Black Lodge, well, it's a war, it's a battle, it's a conflict. So obviously, clearly, the Black Lodge doesn't want us to be bound together and on the side of the victorious. They want us to be on the side of the losers. Because certainly in ancient times, if you were captured in a time of war, you were enslaved. You were considered to be just another spoil of war. Like any other loot, like any other spoils of war, like any other financial economic gain that comes from conquering another people's. Captured soldiers, captured citizens, they were enslaved. And that enslavement came, the rationalization or justification for that enslavement was on the basis of, well, look, I spared your life. I spared your life. So now I have leverage over you. I conquered your land. I conquered your people. I destroyed your army, but I spared you. I spared your life. So now I hold leverage over here. I hold your life in my hands. So now you are enslaved to me. That was a rationalization of it. And that's why slavery goes back all the way back. White men didn't invent slavery. White slavers in the United States did not invent slavery. Slavery goes back pre-Roman times all the way back into ancient antiquity. Well, I mean, just read the Bible, right? You read about Exodus, you read about slaves in Egypt and all the rest of it. So that should go without saying. But the enslavement of humanity by the Black Lodge, by our egos, that is a different matter. But notice how conviction is to be on the side of the victorious, and to be one with or together with the ego is to be a slave, is to be the loser, is to be the one who is vanquished, to be on the side of the losers, the side who are not the victorious. And the ego can't have that. The ego can't have people walking around with conviction. So, well, what do we do? Well, the first thing we do is we convince everybody that convictions are just beliefs. And what we do is we fill people's heads with beliefs and opinions and dogma and superstitious, superficial, literal interpretations of religion. And we get them to become fanatical about those beliefs. And we tell them the more fanatical they are, the more conviction they have. It must be conviction. Look how fanatically you hold on to your beliefs. It must be conviction, right? But if the beliefs are just exist in your mind, it's just a product of ego. Your fanatical attachment to them, identification with them and attachment to them, how is that being one with victory? How is that being one with, where's the yug? Where's the religare? Where's the union with divinity? How are you bound to the truth? If it's a dogmatically held, fanatically held belief. But that is what has been passed down to us in modern times as what conviction is. And there are probably out there no shortage of cynics who would look at the story of Hacksaw Ridge and Doss and what he accomplished, Desmond, and what he accomplished. And there's probably no shortage of cynics who would look at his accomplishment and scoff and say, well, he was just a fanatic. And fanatics can do all kinds of superhuman things. Interestingly, Desmond Doss was a Christian. Not sure exactly what sect of Christianity he belonged to. It was possible he was Lutheran or Anglican or I really don't know, to be honest with you. But he was Christian. He was a fervent Christian. And many of his fellow soldiers were also Christian. It's only late in the movie that we discover the real reason why Desmond Doss refuses to carry a gun. And as it turns out, it has nothing to do with his religion. Because as we know, since the time of since the time of the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages, in fact, and the Crusades, Christians have had no problem taking life, slaughtering one another and slaughtering their enemies and slaughtering Muslims. And, you know, Christians have had no problem with war. There's nothing inherently in the religion as it is taught. If anything, religion has been used and Christianity has been used. Certainly Islam has been used for political gain and war. But Desmond Doss's reason for not wanting to carry a gun is shown to us in the film. And it is a powerful scene because it is a scene of gnosis. It is a scene of self-evident experiential knowledge in which we as the audience have the revelation of the birth of conviction. A conviction that does not come from a book, did not come from a bully pulpit, it did not come from anyone impressing upon him that belief or that dogma or that theory or that opinion. It is not some ancient creed of nonviolence which he decided to adopt for self-righteous mystic pride and, you know, pseudo-spiritual reasons, like Gandhi did, and Gandhi, who used his nonviolence as a form of passive aggression, and we talked about that on Wednesday night. This is a man who whose father was an alcoholic, also a soldier. His father served in the First World War, was a decorated soldier, but he came home from that war shell-shocked, and he turned to alcohol, as many soldiers did from the Great War, the Great War. And it's late in the film, Hacksaw Ridge, that there's an intimate moment between Desmond Doss and one of his fellow soldiers, and the particular soldier that he finds himself in a foxhole with. It's not so much a foxhole as a crater on the ridge. The soldier that he's with is probably one of the toughest, meanest, and most crack shot, hardened veteran soldier in his company, the real badass of the company. And up to that point, that particular soldier sort of tormented Doss kind of mercilessly as a coward, as a weakling, as someone who's not, you know, who's not willing to carry his weight, didn't want to carry a gun, didn't want to defend his fellow soldiers, right? But over the course of the events up on the ridge, this hardened, mean, tough, crack shot veteran soldier watches Doss and sees the conviction within him, fueling his courage. You see, that soldier's courage is fueled by anger and frustration and antipathy and cynicism from being abandoned as a child by his mother and having grown up in orphanages and so on. And so his courage comes from his anger and his meanness, his toughness that he kind of learned over a lifetime of abandonment and having to grow up really fast and having to learn how to take care of himself. But in Doss, he sees something phenomenal. in this svelte, thin, unarmed, easily judged weakling, he sees this tremendous courage coming out of him, but no anger, no animosity, no frustration, no cynicism, no negativity, just the radiant, unwavering, unflinching conviction and Das earns this hardened, veteran, tough, badass soldier's respect. And the soldier begins to shadow Das up on the ridge. And the two of them begin to go around, soldier to soldier, patching them up and carrying them out off the ridge. And in this intimate moment of the two of them hunkered down in an impact crater together, they have this exchange where the soldier sort of admits how different they are, and yet he chooses to express to Das his kind of confusion about what he's seeing, what he's witnessing, and why Das won't carry a gun. And so then Das tells him the reason. And hopefully this isn't a spoiler for anyone. Hopefully nobody will treat it as such. It's based on a true story, so it's not like, I suppose, any of this is real spoiler, but Das describes an incident when his father, well, he says to the soldier, he says, you know, the other guys and the Sarge and everyone, you know, they call me a weakling, they call me a coward, they call me all these things. And he said, and you know, I grew up with an alcoholic father, and my father used to beat me. He used to beat me all the time. And he says, well, I could take it. For my part, I could take it. But what I couldn't take, Das says to the soldier, is when my father beat my mom. And then we flash back to an incident when Das's father was beating on his mother, and Das grabs a gun, a pistol, and cocked it, pointed it at his father's head, and gave his father an ultimatum that he would never touch his mother again, or he would blow his head off. And it's a visceral, very impactful, very, very moving, very real depiction of how such an event took place. Keep in mind that the real Desmond Doss was still alive and participated in the making of the film. He was a consultant on the script, and he was a consultant on the story. So the story of his life and the details around this incident are probably embellished somewhat, but at the same time, completely believable. When you immerse yourself into the scene, you immerse yourself into the moment. This young man stepping up to defend his mother against his alcoholic father, and holding that weapon and pointing it at his father and cocking it, and his hand shaking, and And the soldier says to Das, but you didn't pull the trigger. You didn't kill him. And Das just simply says to him, in my heart I did. In my heart I did. And he said, that's when I made the promise. That's when I made my promise to God. I would never touch a gun again. And what becomes very clear in the course of history, in the course of watching the rest of the movie, is that Das probably wouldn't have been able to accomplish what he accomplished, saving those 75 men single-handedly, alone, had he been armed, had he given into and become accustomed with and become comfortable with the idea of taking life. You see, God had a purpose for Desmond Doss. His innermost being shone with a radiance of compassion and love for others, and to preserve life, and to eliminate suffering for others, beginning with his mother. And his divine mother orchestrated for him an experience. Just put yourself in the shoes of a teenage boy in the 30s, holding a revolver pointed at his alcoholic father, who he had spent a lifetime being abused by, being beaten by, and who he had spent a lifetime witnessing his mother be abused by and beaten by. And now here he was, with that great invention of vendetta and vindication and justice, right? The Colt Peacemaker revolver pointed at this monster. His hand shaking, his mother crying, wailing, his father shouting. And just put yourself in that rage-induced, high, intense, everything dialed up to 11, all the emotions dialed up to 11, and the physical tension and every muscle flexing in your body. To bring you within a hairbreadth of pulling the trigger, but it didn't matter to Das, because in his heart, he had already pulled the trigger. In his heart, he had already convicted himself. And he surrendered to the justice of his divine mother, the severity and the justice of his divine mother and of his innermost being. He put down the gun and his penance, his conviction, his conviction, that which he would be beholden to, that which he would be bound to, would be that incident, that experience would be the first and the last time he ever laid hands on a weapon. The first and only time he ever put his hands on a weapon. Because he had already convicted himself in his heart as being a murderer. And from that was born the conviction. Any desire for retribution, any desire for vengeance, any desire for violence, any desire for taking the life, any desire for taking the quick and easy way was conquered. And what was victorious in its place? The road less traveled, the difficult path, the hard path, the path of principle, the path of sacrifice, the path of courage against all odds, and the courage to stand against all judgments, and the courage to stand in one's status, in one's beingness of conviction, of being a convict. To have had his shadow, his dark side, those aspects of his ego which would have made him into a murderer in the eyes of the world's judicial system. But because he recognized he was already a murderer in the eyes of karma, in the eyes of the Lord, in the eyes of his innermost being and his divine mother, in his heart, he was already a murderer. And therefore, he convicted himself in the light of that. And that was the birth of his conviction. That is the origin of the word convict in the legal system. A conviction in a court of law is when the evidence piles onto the case and a defendant is proven guilty under the weight of the evidence. So the defendant sides with the victorious. The defendant is conquered by the truth. Now, that's all in theory when it comes to the worldly legal system, which, as we know, is not infallible. But the law of karma is a very different system. And he convicted himself, and he, as a convict, as someone who was conquered by the victorious, now he was bound to the victorious, to his innermost being. No belief, no opinion, self-evident experiential knowledge, gnosis. There's no religious, no dogmatic, no philosophical, none of that. It was a conviction born out of experience and out of a circumstance that was divine for him by his divine mother. You want to talk about being on the razor's edge? How's that for an experience? To be put into a fit of rage and to be holding a gun and pointing it at the monster who had been beating you and your mother for your entire life, and your hand shaking, and to the point where even in your heart you've already pulled the trigger, and yet somehow, by some miracle, you don't pull that trigger. You put the gun down. And there's much more that rolls out of these circumstances and out of that choice that he made. And one of the things that rolls out of it was the fact that and again, a beautiful scene. He's there alone in the dark on a ridge, hundreds of, well, many, countless hundreds of bodies strewn about a battlefield that's blown to hell because it's been bombarded by artillery from offshore and all the rest of it. And Desmond Doss starts to pray. And he says, "What do you want from me? Tell me, but I can't hear you." Because just imagine in that moment, Desmond Doss was no Gnostic. He was no initiate. He had no training in metaphysical. He did not meditate. He didn't know anything about receiving guidance from the innermost being or any of the things that we talk about on a practical level. He was a Christian. All he knew is that God was out there somewhere. That's what he believed. And yet his conviction wasn't about any of that. And so he prays. He says, "So tell me what to do. I can't hear you, but I can't hear you." And in that precise moment that he prayed that, all of a sudden, off in the distance, he hears the faint cry, "Medic, help." And without hesitation, immediately, it registers with him. God just sent him a sign. He asked for a sign, and there it is. Out there in the dark somewhere. That's my sign. That was the first man that he saved that night, all alone up on that ridge. It's that type of knowing. That's the real nature of conviction. To have conviction is not to be attached or identified with some belief. Conviction comes from a place of profound knowing. It comes from our experience. It comes from our higher self. And it comes from the deep knowing that our place is to serve and our place is to surrender. As a convicted felon surrenders to the authorities and goes to prison. Only in our case, it's the reverse. We're already in prison. We're in the prison of our mind. We're in the prison of our ego. And it is through conviction and surrender to our higher authority, our innermost being, our true self, that we are freed from prison. We are liberated from the prison of fear, from the prison of pride, from the prison of narcissism, from the prison of worrying about our reputation, from the prison of worrying about how others judge us. When we convict ourselves, when we live as a convict with conviction, bound together with the victorious, the victory, the glory of our innermost. Now we are capable of miracles. Now we face the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune without fear, without hesitation, without questioning, without double guessing, without worrying about what other people are going to think about us, or what our family is going to say, or how am I going to make a living, or what's going to happen to me. No, all we know is that we have this quiet confidence that comes from surrendering to victory. And letting go and abandoning all those worries and all those reasons and all those rationalizations for why we should do this or do that, or listen to what other people say, or what have you, whatever the case may be. We have we're going to share with you something personal, as if none of this has been personal enough. But we're going to share something with you personal. We have always used as a kind of gauge when we are witnessing something, experiencing something that is divine in nature, divinely inspired, when we are being touched by the Christ. Let's backtrack for a moment. We've always been a huge fan of movies. I've always loved the movies. And for a long time, I wanted to be a filmmaker. I went into English and drama in university. And Attlas Arts was the first aspect of the Attlas project which ever found a formulation in my imagination. And I would make films and TV programs and plays, dramatic presentations, and video games, which would move others the way I found myself being moved. And I have always been easily choked up, but not by, I never cry in movies. I don't know if you know the movie Old Yeller. I never cried when Old Yeller died. I don't cry in movies when things are sad. I'm not moved when things are scary, when things are gross, when things are, all of that stuff doesn't affect me. I cry when things are beautiful. When I cry at the beauty. I cry when I see the fingerprints of God. When I hear the sweet song of the Divine Mother. When I see the resplendent light of Christ in whatever form, expressing timeless universal truths, and when it's like something reaching out of the screen and right straight into my heart, like an arrow through the heart, and this blooming light and fire and warmth and this voluptuous eruption, unfoldment, it's like watching a lotus flower under time-lapse photography blooming in my heart. And it comes over me, and I become overwhelmed, and I break down, and I start to cry. And this for me has always been a kind of gauge, a helpful marker, not a red flag, but a green flag, a white flag, that in which I knew that I was being touched by the divine in that moment, because nothing else but that can make me break down in that way. Only the truth, only the light, only the Christ. We watched Hacksaw Ridge last night, and we cried nonstop from the moment that Desmond Doss finds himself alone on the ridge and begins to pray to God, through to the end of the film, through to the end of the end credit sequence. The rest of the movie is just preamble. It's just backstory. It's just setting the stage for the miracle. The real life miracle of a skinny young lad who had grown up beaten and abused by an alcoholic father, who nearly murdered that father in cold blood, and then swore he would never touch a gun again, but was among the first to sign up and volunteer for the Second World War after Pearl Harbor, who was abused, who was judged, ridiculed by just about everyone he encountered in the military, and very nearly court-martialed and sent to prison because of his conviction and his courage and his knowledge, his inner knowing that he had to do what he had to do. Slings and arrows of outrageous fortune be damned. Court martials and generals and colonels and sergeants and be damned. He had to be on that ridge. It is such a rarity You go on the internet, you go on Google, and you start searching for conviction, and it'll break your heart. It'll break your heart. What the experts and the psychologists and the motivational speakers and the self-help gurus will tell you about conviction. It'll break your heart. And when you hear all the stories about all these people who had tough lives and tough childhoods, and they live with the victim mentality, and they expect everyone and everything in the whole world now to bow down to them because they've been victimized and they're so traumatized. And they justify every sin under the sun. They justify every ego and every egoic behavior because I'm living with trauma. How many of them could climb up on that ridge today, I wonder? How many of us could do it? So why does this matter? Does this, is this important? Or is this just base sentimentality? Am I just getting caught up in the emotions of a heroic story and someone who, an individual and a life that's, Hollywood made a exploitative film out of, and some sentimental piece of schlock that I found myself get hypnotized by? Right? It's possible. Anything's possible. Except that our generation, we haven't been tested. No one living today under the age of 50 has really been tested. Not like the generations that came before. But our test is coming. And in many ways, our test is already here. And that's partly what we were talking about on Wednesday, about picking your battles. Because things are only going to get worse, and the authorities, so-called, are going to be coming for us. And they're going to be bringing with them a whole set of mandates, demands, laws, prohibitions. What are we going to do? What are we going to do, brothers and sisters, when we face the music, when we face the court? And do we know where we stand? Have we had our moment where we have made of ourselves a convict, where we have convicted ourselves and surrendered to the only true source of victory within us? Have we gone through our own traumas? Have we experienced our own moment? And have we comprehended what our moments were there? to offer us in terms of experience, in terms of clarifying for us where our convictions lie and where the source of the quiet confidence and limitless courage in the face of every danger, in the face of every judgment, in the face of all threats and all repercussions. Do we have that anchor within us? And do we have ready access to that anchor when the storm comes? And because of all of that, do we have the humility, the down-to-earth acceptance, recognition of our place? Because the storm is already here and it's swelling. It's swelling. Do we have what it takes to stand against the tide? Or are we going to fold? This is not a question of mythical proportions or any sort of hyperbole or over-exaggeration of any kind. It's not Hollywood sentimentality. It wasn't Hollywood sentimentality to Private Desmond Doss. It was what allowed him to perform a miracle and save 75 lives single-handedly, hunted and hounded and surrounded by countless Japanese who were taking no prisoners, who were completely merciless and ferocious because that's the way they had been conditioned to fight. And yet, in the face of all of that, Desmond Doss only had one mantra: God, just help me save one more. And perhaps the reason why we cry throughout that entire section of the film is because that's the same prayer we say. It's the same prayer we pray to the Logos. Not my will, but thine be done. And help me, well, day in and day out as we're waiting for other circumstances to change. In the broader Attlas project, I mean, we say, we just pray for the help that we need in order for us to fulfill our destiny, to fulfill God's work. But day by day on Facebook, for example, in these live streams, for example, our inner mantra, our inner prayer is simply help us reach one more, help us save one more, help us help one more get a little bit further toward their awakening, their enlightenment, and their self-realization. We mentioned this on Wednesday night. We never ask anybody to click subscribe or leave a like or any of that stuff. And the reason why we don't do that is because, yes, we're here being fishers of men. But more than that, we're here to be fishers of fishermen. But what kind of fishermen are we? Since the days of my youth, when I envisioned Attlas arts for the first time, it was inspired that I too would reach the poor masses and touch them and move them with beautiful, resplendent film and television and so on, that I will touch them in their hearts the way I was touched. And I would move them to tears, and I would move them to joy, and I would move them I was thinking in terms of one who fishes with a net. I was thinking like a commercial fisherman. That I'll cast a broad net, the broadest net possible. And with that broad net, I will catch many fish. And I'll be the greatest fisherman who ever lived. And with all those fish, we will feed the world with, we will nourish the world with those whom I catch in the broad net. Well, I'm a bit older now. A bit wiser. Not by much. Just enough wiser to know that that's not the type of fisherman we are. We're a fly fisherman. And the truth of the matter is the Christ fed the multitudes with 2 fish and 2 loaves. If we remember that, if we remember the story correctly. What need have we of nets? What need have we of the multitudes? Here and now, we have 9 beings, 9 monads, cloaked in bodies and dressed in personalities. Here and now, it's you and me. And I'm just casting a fly out over the water. If you've ever seen the film A River Runs Through It, it was directed by Robert Redford, starring a very young Brad Pitt. It features fly fishing. And fly fishing in that film is very much a metaphor for the dance of life and finding one's own rhythm, one's own conviction. To be an artist and a master of life itself. It's a beautiful film, and like The Legend of Bagger Vance, it's a very esoteric film. Legend of Bagger Vance is actually the story of Arjuna and Rama. the story of Arjuna from the Bhagavad Gita. It's an adaptation of that story into a contemporary, well, not so much contemporary, but into an American context, a more contemporary adaptation of the same tale. So it's archetypal and it's esoteric. A river runs through it is a little less so. It's a little less direct in its allusions, and yet one cannot help but feel the deep philosophical and spiritual undertones in that film and the story of these two brothers. Some say it's sort of a Cain and Abel story. There's various different, you can read various different versions of that. We don't take any of our insights from that film from what others have said about it. It's not that type of film from our perspective. You can watch it simply in a meditative state, and the truth will hit you, which is how we approach most. Well, scratch that. It's how we approach nearly all of the films that we watch. There's perhaps a few exceptions to that rule, but only when we're talking about subjects that of a highly historic nature, where there's sort of history or some other things that come into matter, and sometimes we will consult what other people have said about it. But certainly from the esoteric point of view, and from extracting the universal truths that are embedded in the work, we don't rely on what anybody else has to say about that topic, about that subject. Not when it comes to contemporary films. We have the confidence of our conviction that the insights that we receive are presented to us like the findings of a divine courtroom. We are like the clerk in the court, and there's a divine justice, and it's handing down its verdict. And what does the judge do? The judge hands the verdict to the clerk, and the clerk reads it to the courtroom. Or the jury hands it to the clerk, and the clerk hands it to the judge, and whatever the case may be, whatever that pomp and circumstance it goes, because it's different in different jurisdictions of courtrooms anyway. But you get the idea. And that's why this conviction and its relationship to the law all right. Sofula, we're not going to try your last name. Sofula, hopefully we're pronouncing that right, says, I feel nothing can comfort me in this, here and now. Did you come here looking for comfort? What is it about the notion of following one's conviction that suggests that that is a source of comfort or security? Surely Desmond Doss, up on Hacksaw Ridge by himself, surrounded by the Japanese in the dark, praying to God to help him save one more man, surely he was not searching for comfort. Was comfort on his mind? Was comfort in his heart? Or was it the courage of his conviction that allowed him, that gave him the faculties that he required to perform a miracle? What's incredible to consider is the fact that this was a tall, lanky young man. He was not strong. He was not a strong man. He was not built. He was not a, he was made fun of. All the other soldiers made fun of him. The very idea that someone like that would carry a 250-pound soldier on his back and then let him down on a rope down a ridge to the beach below, it was almost laughable. What was it that he had that allowed him to perform a miracle, or allowed a miracle to be performed through him, if not the courage of his conviction? The path of destiny, the path of being, has nothing to do with comfort and security. But there's a confidence, a quiet confidence that comes from that inner knowing that we are bound and together with victory, with the source of victory, with our inner God, with our Divine Mother. And that there is a law, there is a rule to this game called life. We are never thrown anything that is beyond our capacity to handle. So let us repeat that. None of us will ever face anything that is beyond our ability to handle, to deal with, to cope with. So long as we convict ourselves, so long as we have conviction, so long as we bind ourselves to the power and the light and the resplendent source of victory inside of ourselves. Now, I don't know about you, but for me personally, that knowledge lifted a huge weight off of my shoulders. And surrendering to my innermost and swearing to uphold my conviction and surrendering to the plan of my Divine Mother for me lifted a huge burden from my shoulders. Didn't mean that the suffering went away, didn't mean that the hardship goes away. We still have to face what we have to face, and it's not going to be easy. But if you have your conviction, if you know that you don't walk this path alone, and that those entities, those beings who walk beside you, within you, who are you, so much of the worry, so much of the neuroses, so much of the questioning and the self-doubt and the and the concern about what other people say and do and all the rest of it, so much of that falls by the wayside. So if going through life with the quiet confidence and the courage of your conviction puts you in a place of not worrying about what to do and when to do it and why and how and for what reason, then perhaps you can take comfort in that. And again, we stress that our generation hasn't really been tested. I mean, none of us were in Vietnam. None of us had to face anything near Vietnam. Afghanistan, Iraq, okay. But certainly none of us had to face anything like the Great War or the World War II. But we are at war. It's just that the war that we are in is not a physical war. At least not yet. It's a metaphysical war. And the forces are lining up against us and all around us. The enemy is encircling us and enclosing. It's closing its grip. So again, all of us will be faced with some difficult challenges, some difficult tests. And the question that we have to ask ourselves, each and every one of us, do we have the courage of our conviction? Do we know where we are going to draw the line? And do we know why we're drawing that line? And not think and not believe and not theorize, none of those things. Okay. All right. No, I am not here for comfort. Your video came up first. Oh, you're on YouTube. Okay. When I opened the internet, I just woke up. I know all these. It feels like I am screaming in a void. We don't want to put words in your mouth, Sofula. We don't want to assume or judge what you mean precisely and how you feel precisely. Those feelings are yours. But when you use the term, it feels like, you use the expression, it feels like I am screaming in a void, that speaks to me. Because I feel like that. I certainly felt like that a lot. And I feel that way sometimes. Like, I'll give you an example. We have a 2.5-hour video on the esoteric significance of the Star Wars saga. And all we can learn, and how it's an absolutely unprecedented, contemporary, living, breathing example that shows us how mythology degenerates from recognizable universal truths into idolatry and into empty idolatry and entertainment, and how the forces of entropy are responsible for that. But that's only one lesson embedded in that trilogy of trilogies in the Skywalker saga, are incredible, like a cornucopia of esoteric wisdom and truth. And so we spent a great deal of time and effort in making a video about this.
Be it original.
And oh, hang on, we're just going to minimize it for a second here. It's had 1,000 views, and it was published over a year ago. Well, it's now nearly 18 months ago, and it's only had 1,000 views and only 32 likes. This is just one little example from our point of view, and we're beginning to get on. Well, we're not on hundreds of hours of live streams. We've only done 24 live streams, but between our live streams and our blog, right, we have literally hundreds of hours of content written that's going back years now. And even today we posted something on Facebook, and some of the reactions to it were just mind-bogglingly baffling, especially in a Gnostic group. And it seems sometimes like screaming in a void is one way to put it. Another way to put it is being in a crowded room and screaming at the top of your lungs and nobody hears you. Now, we don't know if this is, if you can relate to our experience, but this is what conjured up, this is what your statement, feels like I'm screaming in a void, conjured up in us. And sometimes we feel that way. But then we take a moment and we remember that we're not here fishing with a net, and we're not looking for a platform like, I don't know, Bill Maher has, or Joe Rogan, or or Jordan Peterson, where he literally has millions of followers, because we're fly fishing. We don't have to reach the masses. All we need to do is, like Desmond Doss did, save one more. That's all we need to do. That's all any of us need to do. Just get through one more day, or one more moment by moment. That's the work. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step and is completed with a single step, and another, and another, and another, and another. And if you find yourself feeling like you're screaming in a void, relax. Take a breath. Remember your Divine Mother. Remember your innermost being. And pray. Visualize them in whatever form they take. They can take whatever. Your divine mother can take any form in the universe. So you can imagine her in any form, and she will be there with you. And pray to her. And what do you pray? Just help me. Help me. Help me get through one more moment. Show me the next step. Just the next step. From our perspective, what helped us and we we share this article with you, and there's a link in the chat. This article is all about our individual Divine Mother and how it is she who arranges and orchestrates and organizes all we need in this lifetime in our journey to fulfill our destiny. It's not by accident we chose the image we chose here. And what we went to great lengths in this article to outline is this visual. That, hopefully you can make that out on your browser or on your phone or whatever you're watching on. That is a breadcrumb trail. And if you are familiar with Hansel and Gretel, the fairy tale Hansel and Gretel, all fairy tales are secret esoteric teachings, by the way. All fairy tales, without exception, teach timeless universal truths and metaphysical science, esoteric wisdom. What does Hansel and Gretel teach us? That Hansel and Gretel only make it through the dark wood because of the breadcrumb trail. So here's the prayer that we would pray to our Divine Mother when we felt lost in the void, and when we felt like no one around us was hearing us, when no one around us cared, when all the doors seemed closed and all the windows seemed shuttered, and we were just stuck and lost and everything. What did we pray? Oh, blessed Divine Mother, give me that precious breadcrumb. Just one breadcrumb. Just one breadcrumb. That's all I ask. And when we go through life with one eye in and one eye out, with the conviction that we will never be forsaken, that we are never forsaken, we are never abandoned. Exactly, Benjamin Raphael. Give us this day our daily bread. And if we go through life with that attitude, with that, from that perspective, that we are not forsaken, we will never be forsaken, and that if we look each and every day in our life for just one breadcrumb, one sign, one hint, one clue, one gift, one boon, one blessing, one little miracle, one little serendipity, one little intuition, one little insight, inspiration, little moment of joy, of bliss, of happiness, which filled our hearts and gave us a little reprieve, a little taste of heaven. All of that counts. Each and every one of any such moment that reminds you, hey, God is great. and God is in me. My divine mother is looking out for me. She just gave me this little moment of beauty, this moment of rest, this moment of peace, this moment of calm. It's a gift. It was a breadcrumb. We pick up that breadcrumb and we transform the impression of that breadcrumb, that moment of peace, that moment of clarity, that little intuition, that little insight, that little inspiration, that boon, that sign, that hint, that thing that we overhear on the bus, but it's exactly from a complete stranger, but it's exactly the thing that we hear, that we needed to hear in that precise moment. And all of a sudden there's this wave of wisdom and knowledge that comes over us, because somehow our divine mother orchestrated us to be on that bus, and this complete stranger next to us, him talking on a cell phone and him saying the words that we needed to hear. That's serendipity. And we take that moment, that knowledge, the recognition of that moment, the divinity of that moment, and we transform it, we swallow it. Impressions are like food. But that now that breadcrumb, which was just a breadcrumb, is now this incredible banquet. It's manna from heaven. It's like the latmus bread from the latmus bread from Lord of the Rings, the elven bread, that even a small piece can fill the stomach and freshen the body and energize the soul for days. It's a magical manna from heaven, that breadcrumb. All you need to do is ask and seek and find one breadcrumb each and every day and eat it for what it is, manna from heaven, and know that that's what you're transforming, that impression that you're taking into your body. Anything that you take into your body, including your mind, is food. What you take into your body through your mouth is food for your body. What you take into your body through your eyes and your ears is food for your mind, food for your heart, food for your soul. So we have to beware what we allow to come into our body, yeah? So that is what the manna from heaven in the Old Testament means, not a literal bread that my religion used to teach. Precisely. Manna from heaven is, give us this day our daily bread, that which nourishes us, the breadcrumbs on the trail, guiding us along the path. And we don't want to give anything away necessarily. If anybody plans to read this article on the Divine Mother, but we've mentioned this before. We might as well get into it, because we began tonight's live stream talking about conviction, the courage of conviction, and we used a real life case study and a film about a real life miracle and a man who followed the courage of his conviction, and as a result saved 75 souls and inspired an entire company of soldiers in a remarkable way. And his story has the power to inspire millions, because the film Hacksaw Ridge has the potential to inspire millions. Here is another film. This one is called The Bounty. as you can see, and it is stars Anthony Hopkins and a very young Mel Gibson. And here's Mel Gibson again. How's that for serendipity? Because Mel Gibson directed Hacksaw Ridge, and now here he is acting in The Bounty, a film from the 80s. And of course, this film was based on the true life events of, the true life events of, the mutiny on the Bounty. Which was turned into a very famous novel, Victorian era novel. And this is a painting by Robert Dodd, 1790, depicting the mutiny on the Bounty. And Hollywood has made several different versions, several different films, going all the way back. We can't remember all of them, but two of the famous ones. This is one of the famous ones, just called The Bounty, and then the other one, The Mutiny on the Bounty, was... no, it'll come to me, the actors. Their names will come to me. But that's not important. What's important is that it's a real-life event. Now, consider for a moment, and it's a story. It's also a story about conviction. And about standing up to authority, and what authority and what conviction? Well, let's look at the names of the players involved. Captain William Bligh. Captain William Bligh. Now, William, another way to say William is Bill, and Bligh, there's no getting around it. Bligh is B-lie. The captain is the one who makes the rules. In other words, he is the law on a ship. In fact, you know, actually, if you've done any research into the Admiralty law, the Captain William Bligh, so in other words, Bill belie means laws of men belie. Christian Fletcher, the leader of the mutiny, a Christian is one who follows Christ, and a Fletcher is an ancient trade referring to that master who is the one who puts flights on arrows. That's what a Fletcher is. That's his job. It was a specific job, putting flights on arrows. Flights meaning the feathers that make arrows fly. So follows Christ, puts flights on arrows. In other words, Christ is the one who gives us divine law, and one who puts flights on arrows gives flight to arrows. So divine law gives flight. The Bounty is the name of the vessel. And Sri Lanka means resplendent island. And what is the bounty that this vessel is after? They were sent on a mission to bring breadfruit back to England. Breadfruit. In other words, manna. Bounty, the vessel which seeks manna on the resplendent island. But in order to accomplish that, we must commit a mutiny, a great mutiny against the laws of men which belie, in order that we may give flight to divine law. We're not making any of this up. We didn't have to invent any of this. All of this is there in the name of the ship, in the name of the destination, in the name of the cargo, the intended cargo, the goal, the bounty that the ship was after, and in the names of the key players of the story. Who but the Divine Mother could have orchestrated all of this? Because remember, this is a true story. This is not a fabrication. This is not fiction. This really happened. These are the real names of the people involved. They were really going after breadfruit in Sri Lanka, which means resplendent island. So look at all the little breadcrumbs. And it's a story about conviction and about following the courage of one's conviction. But if examples like this, the bounty, if real life examples like Hacksaw Ridge doesn't give you the evidence, the support, the encouragement that you too are here living a drama, living a heroic journey, living a destiny, a story in which you are the protagonist, you are the hero, you are playing your part. And your Divine Mother is writing this story, unfolding it chapter by chapter by chapter by chapter, moment by moment by moment by moment. All you need to do is observe it. So Sophila says, I do all that. I can say I am grateful for what I am, what I have, but in this here and now, this breadcrumb can't be felt inside me. Can't be felt in me inside. Because we have to live with one eye in and one eye out. We have to see. We have to develop the eyes to see and the ears to hear. We have to find the breadcrumb first. We have to see it. So for example, in this example of the bounty, right? Captain William Bligh, Bill Bligh, the laws of men belie, and Christian Fletcher, one who follows Christ and puts flights on arrows, divine law gives flight. It's all there. You have to be able to see it. And you have to be able to live your life as if you were reading scripture, because the living, breathing Word of God is not bound within the confines of any scripture or any mythology, or it's not bound within the stone etchings of any temple out of ancient times. The living, breathing Word of God is also there. But even there, it has to be extracted. Because if you read the Bible literally, you're not going to get it. You're not going to get the essence of the truth. And if you go through your life literally, you're not going to see and you're not going to hear. You're not going to extract the essence. You're not going to find those breadcrumbs. If you're going through life literally, just everything is just on the surface level. We have to recognize that the logos, as Benjamin is pointing out here, is the word of God is writ large and small in the book of life. All life. Your life, our life, everybody's life. If only we have the eyes to see and the ears to hear it. So how do we develop these eyes to see and the ears to hear? How do we develop the capacity to know that conviction? That's why we mentioned that scene from Hacksaw Ridge where Desmond nearly kills his father. Because that terrifying, traumatic, life-changing moment in his life, he knew it gave him self-knowledge. He knew in that moment that he was a murderer. And then the realization of that, the knowledge of that, the self-knowledge that I have the capacity not only to take a life, but to take the life of my own father in a fit of rage and anger and frustration and vendetta. The realization of that electroshocked him into an awakening, and he immediately convicted himself because the evidence was there. The evidence was in his hand, the cocked gun, and in his heart, he had already pulled the trigger. He could not deny himself. He could not deny his own experience. He could not deny the facts. And faced with the facts, faced with the evidence, an honorable man, an honorable woman, an honorable defendant pleads guilty. Faced with the facts, faced with the evidence, and surrenders to the conviction and becomes a convict and surrenders themselves to the court, to the law. So in our life, in the past, we have had life-altering experiences. Have we taken advantage of them? Were we awake? Were we present? Were we mindful? Or did we use those experiences as an excuse to play the victim and to blame others and or to become traumatized? And now we've blocked the memory of those so-called traumatic events out of our mind, and we don't want to deal with them. We don't want to think about them. We don't want to remember them. We don't want to go over them. In our lives, in our past, is a gold mine of untapped, unmined gnosis, unmined knowledge, just waiting to be extracted. If we have not already done so. And the way to do that is in meditation. To do retrospection meditation. The capacity to go into meditation, relax, concentrate, visualize, and pray. Relax completely. Concentrate. Without tensing the body, without tensing the mind, without creating tension. A relaxed concentration. visualize events from our life. Maybe the past day, maybe the past week, maybe the past year, maybe 20 years ago. And play out those events and visualize them without commentary, without judgment, without analysis, without embellishment. Just simply press rewind on the tape and play the event. And rewind the tape and play the event. And rewind the tape and play the event. Don't relive the event. Don't allow yourself to get caught up in the emotions and the drama and the pain and the suffering, and you don't want to relive the event. You want to observe the event, detached, not identified. Like a forensic investigator watching the Sepulveda film of the Kennedy assassination. There's that great scene from JFK when they're in court and the prosecuting attorney is playing the Sepulveda film, and there's a few frames that he says, and Jack Kennedy, his head recoils back into the left, back into the left, back into the left, back into the left. And he's playing the tape over and over again, the film, I should say. Back into the left, back into the left, back into the left. Because he's trying to hammer home for the jury that the force was pushing him back to the left. That means the force must have been coming from the front and to the right. Because that's how physics works, right? In any case, and he does so dispassionately. As it turns out, it backfires because all he's doing is freaking out the jury who are just watching their commander-in-chief getting his head blown off over and over and over and over and over again. They don't have the dispassionate disconnection. They're getting caught up in it. They're reliving the moment, all the pain, all the frustration, all the outrage, all the trauma of it all. He's able to look at it as a dispassionate prosecuting attorney, detached. He's just making a case. He's just seeking the truth. He just wants conviction. Actually, if you recall correctly, maybe it's not a conviction he's after, but he's a defense attorney and he's trying to get a Lee Harvey Oswald off the hook. But what he's trying to do is prove a conspiracy, a criminal conspiracy. That's what he's trying to do. So he is trying to get a conviction. But the point is that we can learn how to perform retrospection meditation and how to use our past experiences in order to learn about ourselves, that which we need to know. Dispassionately detached, play the scene over and over again in our mind, and relax and concentrate and visualize, and don't worry if the answer doesn't come. Don't worry if the aha moment, the eureka moment doesn't arrive. Just be patient. Just relax. Imagine all those detectives who have to look at, they take all their evidence and take all their photos and everything, they pin them up on a board, and they just sit there and they're just staring at it all day and just for months and months, and in some cases years. Imagine all those detectives working on all those cold cases, those unsolved mysteries, and they have all this evidence to look at, and they can't get the answer. They can't get who is the suspect. So of course we can go through life feeling like we don't have the answers. that we haven't gotten that breadcrumb. But that's because we haven't developed the eyes to see and the ears to hear. Like any good detective, we have to be able to use our intuition, but we have to, that's a muscle. We have to develop that. That's intuition is a faculty of consciousness. The eyes to see and the ears to hear are the third eye and the throat. The throat is the esoteric ear, by the way. Physically, the throat makes sound, but esoterically, it receives sound. This is significant. This is significant because, and here we will share with you, again, a very personal experience, of having the courage of our conviction. We've often said, and we said it again on Wednesday night, we don't prepare for these live streams. Apart from the topic and perhaps a handful of visual aids that we feel might be appropriate. In fact, we have some more that we have yet to show. Pardon me, that we have yet to show. But as Benjamin points out here, our words, they just flow from our heart. And the reason why they're able to do that is because the esoteric ear is the physical throat. What that means is that we don't know what we're going to say until we say it. I mean, I don't know. I, the physical self, I, the me, the physical mortal vessel, the messenger here that's actually speaking. I don't know what Attlas is going to say until I say it. Because I'm not thinking it. It's not coming from my mind. Because I'm receiving it in the throat, and then I speak it with the throat. That means I have to put all my faith in my innermost, in Attlas, and in my ability or capacity to hear and share, express as I've received it. And to be able to do so live in front of however many people, or type into a article for posterity's sake, or, well, these videos are there for posterity's sake too, so why not? But that's because I have the courage of my conviction. I often have to stop and reread what I just typed. And then I'm in awe of what I just typed. God is great. The Logos is And all I can be is humbled that these words are coming through my fingers, that I'm a vessel, a messenger for these messages, for these words. Where at some point you start to realize, you start to become a Is that why when Moses was sent by God to speak to Pharaoh, he did not really know what to say, but rather God put the words into his mouth? Yes, precisely. He has the ears to hear via the esoteric ear, correct. Well, you're very welcome. This is why when Jesus speaks in the Bible, he says, my Father in heaven, my Father in heaven, my Father in heaven. Because the man, the physical vessel, is just a messenger. And that's why we say we. I don't say I this and I that. Although some have said, well, if you speak with the words of Attlas, why not say I am Attlas? Why not just go and call yourself Attlas and call it a day? We may make that leap at some point in the future, but in the meantime, we feel it's more helpful and appropriate to be an example for others and recognize that you don't just wake up one day and you are your innermost being. It does not work that way. Awakening and enlightenment is not like you go from asleep and completely ignorant of your higher self to being an awakened, enlightened Buddha. It does not happen that way. It is this gradual process, and it's a gradient. And as you progress along that gradient, you will begin to hear and feel and sense and receive more and more and more. And you will at some point recognize that you're just a vessel and a servant and a messenger, and that if you have the privilege of awakening in the astral plane and meeting your innermost being and meeting your divine mother and realizing that the whole of the higher worlds are all inside of you, not outside of you, and that the whole universe, the physical universe, is inside of you, not outside of you, that all of that's just an illusion. And if you have the blessing, the profound and divine gift, the miraculous boon of ever being touched by the Christ, and you experience the perfect multiple unity by being one with it, just for a few moments, you know that there is no I. There is the I that is we, and there is the I that is all. So you can play this I game or this we game all the way until you get into the absolute, until you're one with the great I am that I am. But again, it's a nuanced, there's a nuanced reality to this. Because just as your physical body, you might say my body, you might say I, right? But your body is made up of trillions and trillions and trillions of cells. The logos is like that. Right? The logos, the perfect multiple unity, is made up of countless trillions upon trillions and trillions of individual monads, all at different levels, all living different lives, all playing out different dramas. All right. We're getting on in time, and so we're getting into some of the nitty-gritty stuff about practical things about, okay, so you have this courage of a conviction, you have this quiet confidence, you have this connection to your innermost being. So what is it like, and various different things. And Roy asks the following question: what's the difference between Atlas and Attlas, the Greek spelling? Okay, so we're going to type this into the chat, Roy. Okay. So Attlas project minus the I, the minus the I equals see that, Roy? Now, very quickly, just for Roy's benefit, we're going to say Japanese shrine gate. Okay. Roy, can you observe the image on the screen? Do you see that shrine gate? That's a Japanese shrine gate. That is the entranceway to every shrine in Japan. And in fact, this is a phenomenal thing. This is the shrine, the shrine of the 1,000 torii gates. And there's a YouTube video that we might be able to pull up here of here it is. It's a 20-minute video. There we go. Here we go. Let's go back. Okay, so this is the Fushimi Inari Shrine in Kyoto. It's the shrine of 1,000 torii gates, and again, this is the entrance of every shrine in Japan. And interestingly, it's also now, obviously, it's the two pillars, Jachin and Boaz, right? The two pillars of the tree of life. We can make this bigger, can't we? Yeah, there we go. It's not. This is not the best video because everybody has their umbrellas open, and the person with the video camera is here. There we go. This part's better. So we were here. We were here in person, and the experience of this, it's like going through a portal. It's like going through a wormhole, a spiritual wormhole. It's gate after gate after gate after gate after gate, it's like, now this particular day in this particular video doesn't do it justice, but really you'd have to be there to really have it done justice. And there's another thing that we can show. Again, speaking of conviction, this is a pond where we walk practically every day. And I don't know if you can see, make it out. You can just make it out that there's a little floating island here, and there's some painted turtles on it. And we were sitting. We always there's a picnic table over here. It's out of the frame, and we go on our walk. This is the halfway point. We will sit down and we will watch the water and contemplate and watch the turtles and just take a rest. And this is also connected to the dog park where we live. So people will bring dogs, and the dogs come and play in the water, and it's a beautiful place to sit down and chit chat with strangers and watch their dogs. I love dogs. I love all animals. So, and it's fun watching the painted turtles sun themselves and so on. So one day I was there, and some people came and sat down, and I started chatting to them, and I said, so I asked them, I said, do you know the North American, the First Nations prophecies and legends about Turtle Island? And we were talking about that, about the end times, and how North America is Turtle Island and whatnot and so forth. And then I said, well, there's Turtle Island. We have our very little microcosm of Turtle Island right here in our pond. And they thought that was really cool, not really interesting, whatever. And over the course of a week, back in the summer, we had this conversation with 2 or 3 people, different days. Just happened to be, because beautiful days, sunny days, and the turtles were out sunning themselves, right? So it was easy to have a conversation about Turtle Island. Lo and behold, a week goes by, and we're on our walk, and what do we discover? Someone had put a sign down on the trail pointing to Turtle Island. We didn't do this. And it's fair to say there's a good chance that the people we talked to didn't do this. Somebody did this. And it appeared in the weeks after we had our conversations with the people about Turtle Island. And what's really, really cool about where they decided to put this sign and which part of the trail, at the entrance, at the Torii Gate, the 2 pillars, this sign is pointing for the traveler, for the seeker, to pass through the Torii Gate, the pillars of Attlas, the pillars of heaven and earth, the pillars of Jachin and Boaz, the pillars of Hercules. This is the path that leads to Turtle Island. This is just another one of those little breadcrumbs where in the moment, we're just speaking from our heart, moment by moment, just having a casual conversation with a stranger in the moment, talking about what we're seeing, turtles on a little island, but having just the confidence and the courage and the conviction to share that with complete strangers. And then being moved or inspired to now put a sign down for all to see. So that now everybody that comes here, who passes through the gates, is going to know that this what they're seeing with this place where we all converge, where we all come together, and where the dogs play, and where we all sit down on the picnic tables and chit chat and take a rest on our walk and everything. This place is Turtle Island. Just a little breadcrumb. Just a breadcrumb. Well, we're glad, Sofala, that something here tonight has made sense for you. And we're glad that you took the time to join us. We're glad that everyone took the time to join us. You are always welcome, and you are welcome to share this video or invite others to come join us if you found this valuable. If you feel as though you received something valuable here and you want to pay it forward, you can do that. And invite others, share with others. Point others in the direction of our work and our efforts in the same way that somebody was inspired to point in the direction of Turtle Island. Just based on a little conversation that we had. And who knows, maybe they spent hours on the internet researching what Turtle Island is and and the significance of it. Who knows? Who knows? But one last thing we'll mention about Attlas project and Attlas and the 2 T's and whatnot. You'll notice that if you take Attlas project and you take away the I and the apostrophe S, right? You take away the I's. I's are also egos, right? So you subtract the egos. You subtract the ego and you subtract the attachment. That's what an apostrophe is. An apostrophe S is an attachment. Identification and attachment with. Again, we didn't make this up, right? We were born this way. We were born this way, and Attlas was a name that was given, that we learned, that we learned it was our true name. So this was all orchestrated by our Divine Mother. As for Allux, nobody asked, but we're going to tell you. Allux equals all light, right? All light, Allux, all lux, but it's also al lux, which, so I'm going to do this one at a time. So Allux equals all light, right? But al lux also means God light. Right? Like Allah, right? Al lux, God light. Our name is Attila Louis Lenvi, meaning our initials are ALL. Breadcrumbs, signs, and when you combine these with some of the other experiences that we've had, some of which we've shared, some of which you can read about on our blog, but certainly this one, we've had our share of, yeah, it's right. We've had our share of serendipities, and we've had our share of miraculous experiences. It gives us the courage of our convictions. And that's why we're here encouraging you to seek out the source of your convictions and to prosecute yourself, to prosecute yourself, your false self, under the weight of the evidence. And that evidence you gain by being a witness and by accumulating the testimony. Evidence, objective evidence, right? Be a witness of your own life, of those circumstances, moment by moment by moment. Again, we're going to thank everyone again for joining us. We're going to call it a night. Unless there's any other questions that anybody would like to ask before we call it a night, please feel free to do so now. Otherwise, we'll say goodnight. And we wish you all a pleasant weekend, and we hope to see you again next week. No. You know, often we've said this before. We can't tell you. I can't tell you what some of the topics coming up might be because I don't know. I don't know. But if you have questions that you want to leave for the next time, feel free to leave them for the next time. You can always reach out to us on Messenger or post something on our Facebook or something to that effect. I mean, we're available, right? It's not, this is not the only forum that you can interact with us, certainly, but we of course enjoy the interaction. And in fact, we'll have to look into the capacity of how many people we can host, because with the small numbers that come to these live streams, we might be able to do one like a Zoom call. And we'll have to look into the details on that and getting everybody to link and how that will work. So leave that with me, and maybe we'll try that next week. And maybe we'll try to do something more like, and have it more of like an interactive type thing. So thank you all, and we'll say goodnight. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you soon.